Professor Andrew Grulich is a program head at the Kirby Institute. He's led the EPIC New South Wales study, but he's been a leader in all of the work that we've done as a partner with New South Wales Health. And can I just say, because this will be my last chance to do so before Andrew joins us, how much I enjoyed working with David Cooper. I can understand why people spoke about the many aspects of David, and I'll let you into a secret. He was one of very few people who ever invited me to his home for a dinner. Politicians don't generally get invited, certainly health ministers, to people's homes. They say, let's have a coffee, let's go to a cafe. But David and his wife Dorrie had us at his home. He was a wonderful man. I know he'll be sorely missed, but his work will be carried on through the Kirby, and particularly through people like Andrew Grulich. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Minister Skinner. And can I start with another round of applause for the amazing Karen Sharp? Who could have carried that through? No slides, but I thought that was the most elegant presentation. The slides are super fantastic, and I've got them on my iPad. So it's my duty to quickly describe to you the early results of this study. So this was an implementation program with a piece of research tied onto the end, tied onto the side of it, and I had the privilege with David Cooper of being the co-principal investigator of the study that had to examine this. Now, the Minister was a hard taskmaster. She said we had to start in 3 months, and so that involved getting the ethics, writing all the protocols, all the normal things involved in a clinical trial, formal clinical trial. This was conducted under Australia's clinical trial notification scheme. It was tough, but it was worthwhile. So this is a highly targeted program based on epidemiological data in Australia. We focused it on those at risk, who were mostly gay men, and there you can see those dot points of the risk factors. We commenced recruitment in March 2016. As Kerry said, our initial target was for 3,700, but when we hit that target in 8 months, we hoped that we would reach it in about a year. And there was still clearly demand from men who were clearly at risk. The study was, that cap was lifted so that all eligible gay and bisexual men could receive PrEP as quickly as possible. The only thing about the follow-up that I want to focus on today is that we tested, they were required to come back and get their PrEP and be tested for HIV and STIs at 3 monthly intervals. It was a statewide program. As still many men on drugs, so I'll say it is a statewide program. Not like many clinical trials, just based on in a few hospitals here and there, but really at sexual health centres from Albury-Wodonga to Lismore in the north out to Dubbo, a truly statewide program aiming for true population impact. And you saw this slide from Kerry, just relentless upward recruitment. The little bend at the end is not because we had saturated recruitment, it's because we had a 1 month overlap after PrEP was listed on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. We wanted to make sure that nobody missed out in that initial phase. So there was still a lot of demand right till the end. And this, based on our epidemic and based on our cohort data, this was very much focused on gay populations, and so 99% were gay and bisexual men, about 95% gay identifying, and about 4% bisexual. There were two primary outcomes, but the one I'll focus on today is the population-wide effect of this, and this was a before-after comparison in HIV diagnoses. So the before period being the 12 months prior to study recruitment, that's the 12 months prior to 1st of March 2016, and the 12 months after being the 12 months after 1st of November 2016, which is when we had our 3,700 participants. But because of that rapidly increasing slope, it is important you note that by the end of that period, we actually had 7,600 people on treatment. And this is the overall finding in terms of recency of HIV infection. This is based on surveillance definitions we have in New South Wales. Recent diagnosis being based on recent HIV testing or incomplete Western blot or a history of a seroconversion illness. And you see there we had a 32% decline in recent infections in that year. And keeping in mind, we've seen from Kerry that prior to here, the diagnoses in New South Wales were basically flat. And a smaller decline in infections where there was no evidence that it was recent. Now, some of those will have been recent. They just don't have the testing history or a seroconversion diagnosis to enable that definition to be made. But the reason we've done that, we've looked at it this way, is that, of course, it's only recent infections that PrEP could have influenced. Many new HIV diagnoses have been made are due to infections that have happened years previously. My next few slides focus on the results in relation to recent infections. So by age, you see that there was a particularly large effect in those in older gay and bisexual men, with a 45% decline in 45-plus-year-olds, similar decline in the 30s, but much smaller declines in young gay men. In fact, basically no decline in 18 to 24-year-olds. When we looked at this by geography, we saw an extraordinary 52% decline in men living in the central Sydney gay suburbs. This is 7 postcodes which are known to be those areas, or documented to be those areas with high concentrations, more than 10% of gay and bisexual men. And no decline, effectively no decline in other Sydney suburbs. And then the other very striking pattern is that while we saw almost a 50% decline in Australian-born gay and bisexual men, we saw a much smaller decline, about 20% in Asian-born gay and bisexual men, and no decline at all in men from other non-English speaking countries, in fact a slight increase. So we are seeing great declines, but they are somewhat unevenly distributed. Kerry showed a slightly different version of this graph based on all diagnoses. This graph is based on recent HIV infection. And I show you this just to show how low we're getting with Australian-born gay and bisexual men. We've had a couple of quarters where we've had 6 recent diagnoses in Australian-born gay and bisexual men. It's really exciting to just see how low that's getting towards 0, which is of course our target, but no decline, just no decline at all in foreign-born gay and bisexual men. So in conclusion, this targeted PrEP rollout at scale, so it's both targeted and it's at large scale, has led to a very substantial decline of about 30%, 1/3, in the year following complete recruitment in this study. And this is completely unprecedented in the New South Wales epidemic, and the speed of that reduction, I think it would be safe to say, is pretty well unprecedented internationally. And the magnitude of that reduction continues to evolve as we get more and more people on PrEP. And we are absolutely monitoring that every quarter to see how that changes quarter by quarter, to see where we need to focus our response. We are concerned that we need to do better in young gay and bisexual men, the gay and bisexual men who live outside the central Sydney gay suburbs, and non-English speaking overseas-born gay and bisexual men. And these really need to be the focus of our attention. Some other challenges so the equitable response I've just talked about. I think we really need to monitor and maximise uptake. Mathematical modelling suggests that if we want to maximise herd immunity, we want to be targeting about 70% of those at risk. And that's quite a sophisticated measure. It requires combination of data on PrEP uptake by risk behaviour. But we have those sort of behaviour collected by the Centre for Social Research and partners in the gay community periodic surveys, and that will be very valuable. So we need to monitor and maintain high levels of uptake. We do need to acknowledge that in the existence of a new medication that protects almost completely against HIV, we are seeing increases in condomless sex. And the key issue here is to ensure that those who are having condomless sex with new partners are on PrEP, and we need to target that. And my bell is going off. The related issue is that in terms of STI prevention, we really need to ensure PrEP is linked to testing, and I think we shouldn't give up on targeting strategic condom use in PrEP users. I couldn't finish without acknowledging the huge team. A study like this involves a huge numbers of individuals in the ministry and just in the community, in the Kirby, a great team, and in the clinical sites, an enormous number of people. And I want to finish by thanking my co-principal investigator, David. It's no exaggeration to say that the study could not have happened without him. His gravitas, his leadership led to the adoption of this really audacious study protocol and helped the adoption of it through helping convince the political leadership. The political leadership was very receptive, but it was an evidence-based response, and really only the evidence that's generated by a person of the calibre of David Cooper is going to be sufficient in that sort of case. So, David, we miss you. Thank you.